What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So hopefully everyone had a good time over the weekend with Halloween, and now we're into November. It feels like this year is going by very quickly. Let me know if it's just me who's feeling that. But today we have a bunch of things to go over, which does include the potential for an absolute classic to be revived by Nintendo, as it was unbanned in Germany. We're also going to be talking about Sega and Microsoft, an interesting partnership, in Sega once again referencing their Super game. And we're also going to talk about right to repair and how you're now allowed to repair at least one part of your game console. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with Nintendo and their Nintendo Switch Online. It's been quite the talk over the last week and a half or so, especially once that pricing got out there for the Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis expansion pack tier, and, well, not a great reception for their trailer. In fact, you can see the like to dislike ratio, and now it's apparently the most disliked video on Nintendo's YouTube channel. And I thought about that. I said, wait a minute, this is a channel that has the announcement trailer for Federation Force. This one is still more disliked now, though, with, I think, Federation Force having about 97,000 dislikes. Nope, Nintendo Switch Online over like 115,000, and it is still climbing. It very well could set a bar that maybe no video from Nintendo can reach, but they've surprised me before, so who knows what the future holds there. I'm not sure if they got the message here because it's Nintendo and they're pretty hard-headed when it comes to this stuff, so I feel like their plan is, yeah, legitimately just to push forward, keep throwing as many games as they can at the service until everyone just goes, well, I mean, I guess there's like 50 N64 games here, and most of the library that I would want to play. Yeah, I guess now it's finally worth it. But to me, you might as well work on that basic tier as well as we go along and just get some features added to it that we come to expect at this point. Also, we did have games with gold announced for November, and well, let's take a look here. They put a whole trailer out as well as a card going over the different games. We have Moving Out, that's available November 1st to November 30th. We have Deadlands, that's November 16th to December 15th. Rocket Knight, that's like the remade one, that's sort of like the 2.5D looking one. That's November 1st, November 15th. And then Lego Batman 2, DC Superheroes, that's November 16th to November 30th. Probably the two best games on this list is Moving Out and Lego Batman 2, which, not great for games with gold if those are your two best games, an Xbox 360 game and then a smaller game like Moving Out. Like, Moving Out is legitimately fun, and it's a good game to play with a couple of other people, so that's one that I would check out, but otherwise, not great in general for Xbox Live games with gold. And I've said this before, Microsoft is clearly focused on Game Pass as their big subscription, and that's what they want you to sign up for, not necessarily just Xbox Live. Although we do have the anniversary for Xbox here, and maybe they'll add a few to it. I'd like to hear them talk about backwards compatibility for the original Xbox and the Xbox 360 and add more titles, but games with gold certainly could use a couple of surprises as well. Oh, and we talked about how Advanced Wars Reboot Camp was delayed into spring next year. That's the game that WayForward and Nintendo are working together on, but strangely enough, the date may have accidentally just been leaked on the eShop. Many people started taking screenshots of it. For example, you can see this here. Stealth took a screenshot of it, and it appears to show a release date of April 8th. And I mean, that seems about right for being springtime. It's just strange that it randomly just kind of popped up. I mean, it's a Friday as well. It's just, why would the eShop just randomly list this date? It's very possible it could just be a placeholder date that they have in mind. They're like, okay, sometime in the spring, let's just drop a date in the eShop and it won't go live, and then accidentally it went live and became visible on the page. But like I said, April 8th, wouldn't surprise me. It's a Friday, it's in the spring. Advance Wars, I guess, just needed an extra, like 3 or 4 months. Any issues they may have had with remote work or just delays, deadlines being missed, it's WayForward working with Nintendo, so that can happen, of course, and I guess we can look towards April for Advanced Wars Reboot Camp. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with why everyone's talking about GoldenEye, because out of nowhere, it was unbanned in Germany. In fact, it was set to be unbanned after 25 years. That appears to be the time period that's placed on different forms of media there, but it appears it's happened a bit early. We can see this over on VGC. They had spotted this and posted up an article saying GoldenEye 007 has been unbanned in Germany, potentially pointing to a re-release. The iconic shooter has been removed from the list of media harmful to young persons. This was set to happen automatically after 25 years, but according to, well, here we go, Schnittbereich, the removal was at the request of someone or an entity rather than as a formality. I probably didn't read that right. I didn't see an achievement pop up for doing so. The game has been removed from the list of media harmful to young persons, along with Blood Rain and Blood Rain 2. Those are getting remasters. We've had that announced. And what's interesting here, yes, the eShop, there is an eShop, obviously Germany and Europe. So if the game was to appear on the Switch, well, they would have to get it unbanned. And that would be a big time announcement for the Nintendo Switch Online service. I know there's a lot of issues with just the functionality of voice chat, messaging, everything there, but that's something that would get several people excited, and yes, you'd be excited through nostalgia goggles for this one, because I can tell you now, I've played GoldenEye semi-recently, definitely within the last couple of months, doing footage capture on the Nintendo 64, that Ultra HDMI. Hasn't aged the best, but if it did go to the Switch Online service and you at least had online play and probably improved performance and visuals, as we've seen with some of the current games available on that Nintendo Switch Online platform, yeah, that would get people pretty excited. Mostly old people like me, but you know, you gotta give us one. Now, I also want to bring up the other possibility here. Could Microsoft and Nintendo come together and maybe started talking a bit about that GoldenEye remake that has leaked online? Like, you can technically download it and play it, and I did a whole video on it checking it out because it was such an interesting thing to see. A game that should have been released like almost a decade ago, but it got shelved and basically canceled at the last minute, and there were a lot of stories as to why. It seems based on new information, Nintendo didn't want it on anything other than the Switch, and Microsoft said, well, we can't come to an agreement, so unfortunately, a game that had that really cool feature where you go from the new visuals to the old visuals on the fly, and wow, was it... You realize what games looked like then, right? When you put it next to what they were able to do with that remake, and you're like, how did we play this? Well, we played it on like 17-inch CRT TVs and we loved it. But the idea of bringing back this remake and maybe attempting to release it again if Nintendo and Microsoft came back to the table and figured it all out. And I think MGM, because there is the 007 license in there, but we've seen, I mean, IO is making a 007 game. So I think if all parties came to an agreement, we could see that remake, or maybe this is for Nintendo to release it on that Switch Online service, and Microsoft, who doesn't seem to have a problem releasing rare titles like Banjo-Kazooie on the platform, that could also be what we're heading towards. But it's odd because some entity seemed to get this thing unbanned earlier than it was supposed to be. And I mean, could that be because Nintendo has it planned as one of those 38 games for the 64 that have been data mined? It's very possible. Could it, though, be that we're heading towards a big release for a remake for GoldenEye? That's kind of what I'm hoping for myself, because I've seen what this game is like and what it plays like on you can play it on PC through emulator, on an Xbox 360 has been modified, and that with online play would be phenomenal. Think of what we have with Perfect Dark right now on the 360, just with GoldenEye and online play. That could be a lot of fun. So we'll keep an eye on this to see if anything comes from it. It's just an interesting thing to see that it randomly got unbanned early, almost like someone has a plan for it. Next up, let's talk about this new agreement, or this new partnership between Sega and Microsoft. They put it out in a press release last night, and as soon as it hit the internet, questions were flying all over the place as to what exactly this means. So let's take a look here. This was posted up by Wario64. Sega Corporation and Microsoft Corporation have agreed in principle a strategic alliance that explores ways for Sega to produce large-scale global games in a next-generation development environment built on Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. The alliance would form a key part of Sega's mid to long-term strategy, allowing the business to move forward with Super Game, a new initiative for developing new and innovative titles where the key focuses are global online community and IP utilization. Super Game, by the way, was mentioned back in May with investors. They posted this slide up here, and no one knew what they were talking about. The Sega was like, hey, in the next 5 years, we'll not be able to release this Super Game. I believe that's their code name for some big new thing they're trying to create. Could be something that is based with cloud gaming in mind, specifically with like a community that they have set up. And It sounds like they want to make a large-scale live service style game, basically something they release and they support over the next 10 years that would also utilize the cloud itself. So I think Sega is figuring out, hey, companies like Bungie realized they could do Destiny 2 and keep that moving along, continue releasing content and making money from it. And I feel like Sega wants that big game that they can kind of hang their hat on and of course continue to generate revenue from over a 10, even 15-year period. They go on to say Microsoft and Sega have agreed upon the foundation for this alliance, and through mutual cooperation will look to build further technological evolutions with areas such as the network infrastructure and communication tools required for global online services being a key priority. Additionally, by shifting to a next generation development platform, Sega can effectively adapt to diversifying work styles and potential infrastructural changes. Essentially, what's happening here is this is a deal with Microsoft, not a deal with Xbox necessarily. So think about how we had that deal between Sony and Microsoft, where Sony would be able to leverage Azure going forward in, I'm sure, several things they have planned out, not just for PlayStation, but for Sony, right? And if you consider kind of the working environment we're in now, where there's a lot of remote work going on, and if you can leverage Azure and their data centers in order to develop this super game, and then of course use the cloud computing to lean into the idea of maybe a big community live service style game, which a lot of developers and people in the industry have at least expressed interest in. We've heard even from Kojima the idea of that could be it could be massive if, well, the right person comes along and is able to leverage it correctly. So Sega, their super game. Apparently, the idea of using Azure is key or pivotal for this. Like, they need Azure to create this thing. No one really knows what it is exactly. It's just this big thing they want to make that they've titled Super Game, and I'm sure we'll see it over the next 4 years in these investor briefings until they're finally ready to show it off. So, could it be a new IP? Could it be something to do with Sonic? Could it finally be that AAA Knights game? I guess we'll find out in the next couple of years. Also, I did see this floating around. No, this doesn't mean that Xbox is buying Sega or Microsoft buying Sega. It is an actual partnership between them. Could it happen someday? I mean, sure. Sega could mess this super game thing up and it could really damage their company. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that happens. So this is not the announcement that Microsoft is buying Sega and adding them to their big overall studio lineup that they have now to develop for Xbox. But like I said, who knows what the future holds there. Next up, let's talk about right to repair and specifically your game console, because it looks like a new exemption has been made for one part that you're allowed to service or take somewhere, have it diagnosed, and have maintenance done on your system. We can see this over on gamesindustry.biz. They say U.S. Copyright Office rules console owners can repair optical drives. The U.S. Copyright Office has announced a change to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that will let console owners repair the optical drives on their own devices. The exemption, led by the Librarian of Congress, also allows consumers to perform diagnosis, maintenance, and repair on other software-enabled electrical devices. However, there is one issue here. The Register also notes that the exemption to video game consoles is limited to optical drive repair. If a game console doesn't have a disk drive, such as a digital PS5 model, it is not eligible for self-repair under the new rule. The obvious issue here is how much longer are we going to have systems with optical drives? This very well could be the last generation that we have a Blu-ray drive in our platforms, in the Xbox or the PlayStation, as they released immediately with digital-only systems, the Series S and the PS5 Digital Edition. The fact that this does not apply to those and you really can't do much because there's no optical drive is a problem. This is a very small footnote, I'm going to say, because while the digital drive or the optical drive in these systems does have issues, we also have a ton of other problems surrounding that optical drive with the motherboard, the memory, storage devices, all kinds of stuff that can go wrong inside of these systems. Now, I will say we have been working down to a point where we basically just have a motherboard now. There's no hard drive inside or any of that, but you have like the fan or just chips on the boards that can go bad. The fact that we're not to the point where you can take your system wherever you want, have it diagnosed and repaired without Microsoft or Sony causing a whole big thing about it, and Nintendo, of course, thrown in there, still an issue to me. And of course, they could release documentation around repairing these or around error codes, and the list goes on there. It's a very small thing. It's nice that if someone jams something in the optical drive, you can repair it yourself by looking up a YouTube video, because the disk drives, while they are complex, they're not that bad to work on if you have the right documentation in front of you that maybe the company could release or just a YouTube video. We've fixed countless drives on this YouTube channel during Tech Waves, and I've heard from people, hey, they were able to fix their own drive. So at least we have this, but there's still a long way to go when it comes to right to repair and your own electronics that you've purchased. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Horizon Zero Dawn and the Steam Deck. Now, Valve has been sending out Steam Decks to different companies, developers, publishers, all of that, so they can get their games ready and, of course, try the thing out and see what they think internally at these different companies. And we have had some people post up videos and screenshots of their games working on the Steam Deck, which is pretty cool. And they'll kind of go over some things that don't necessarily work right away that they are working to fix at that time. But we did get this post from Shuhei over at PlayStation saying, thanks to Valve Software, checking out Horizon Zero Dawn on Steam Deck. It is still really weird to me to think that we will have PlayStation games that we were just playing on the PS4, right? And obviously we're playing some on the PS5 through backwards compatibility and all this, and they're going to be portable on something like the Steam Deck. It is almost, I mean, I guess you could say mind-blowing, right, at this point, that we're already there. And it is cool because now we're thinking about all these games that Sony is moving over to PC, and you immediately go, wait, I can play that on my Steam Deck. Like, you don't have to build the super expensive PC to take advantage of it. It's not going to run as good on a Steam Deck compared to, you know, the $2,000 PC that you build with the video card that takes up more than half that budget at this point. But still, it's pretty neat to think that you buy a Steam Deck and you still also have access to several games that PlayStation has a pretty serious effort right now with their new PlayStation PC label in making available. We know that God of War is showing up in January, Uncharted also following up, and then who knows after that? Sackboy, Gran Turismo, Bloodborne. It's just cool to know that we have this Steam Deck coming up and we have a lot of these PlayStation titles showing up as well. And you even have support from people at PlayStation like Shuhei around the Steam Deck and these PlayStation titles going to PC. Although looking at Shuhei holding the Steam Deck with Horizon on that screen kind of makes you want another handheld from Sony, doesn't it? I would just like to see some sort of competition thrown in there with like the kind of the hybrid scene so Nintendo can look over and see, oh, there's like a PlayStation Vita 2 there that also docks, and maybe we should release that 4K Switch. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, have you ever played 007 GoldenEye from the Nintendo 64? Hey, 61% said yes, I've played it at least once, but 39% said no, I've never played it before. And this is one of the reasons I'm going to be making the push for that remake to be released on like the Xbox, the Switch, PC, whatever, because I still think the original GoldenEye, while it would be really cool to see pop up, and trust me, I'd get a kick out of that, I really would. I don't know how well it's aged for a new audience that's come into the space, because the 64 games already is like, I see some people like, oh, that was definitely an early time in 3D. Now think of an early time in 3D and the first-person shooter trying to adapt to a single analog stick. The interesting thing about GoldenEye, though, is it did leverage 2 analog sticks if you were one of the few people at the time who had 2 64 controllers just laying around that you could use. It back then, expensive to get all this stuff, and I think even when the 64 released, it was harder to find controllers even then. But still, if they did this, I think there would be a lot of people trying GoldenEye very quickly and then kind of moving on. So I prefer for that remake with the updated visuals, control schemes, options, and the online play. But I guess we'll find out, hopefully, in the next year or so, what exactly is going on with this whole GoldenEye thing. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Persona saying, when you combine the PS1 backwards compatibility to PS2, the library of them together, you can play most of the games in the Final Fantasy, Persona, Mana, Chrono, Star Ocean, Tales series. Not to mention one-offs like Legend of Dragoon. It's actually quite overwhelming. You get a PS2 and you start to realize, wow, the PS1 library and the PS2 library completely open to me. And I thought about collecting there for a little while, but there are just so many, and I'm trying to work on this GameCube collection. But I will say this, I'm hoping that modding scene that we've had with HDMI being soldered into all these different systems starts to really move into PS2, because how cool would it be to have a completely decked out PS2, an HDMI port soldered on the back, and then you'd also have an SD card solution inside of it that you can kind of work into the board, and that would become really interesting for me specifically, because I like to do those mods on this channel, but just overall, because of that vast library, to have access to that on your PS2 through HDMI would be something else. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There was this whole situation around GoldenEye now being unbanned in Germany early, potentially for Nintendo to come in and release it on the Switch, or Microsoft and Nintendo working together. A lot of possibilities here. Let me know your best guess. And then also, what about Sega and Microsoft partnering up so that Sega can build their super game leveraging Azure? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.